Hello and welcome to A Celtic World, the YouTube channel and podcast made by Celtic fans all over the world for Celtic fans all over this great big Celtic world. From Inamura to Inverness, Shin to Shetland, wherever you happen to be watching from, you're very much part of A Celtic World. And who do we have joining us this evening? We have two in Australia and one in Bangkok. Well, let's say hello to David in Bangkok first, who I saw in the flesh quite recently. Wasn't that a treat for us both, David?
Just to clarify the extent of flesh that was on show. No, it was great to see you. Sadly, the football didn't meet our superb standards. But yeah, good to see you. And hey ho, Stephen and Anthony and the people in the chat. Looking forward to an entertaining and uplifting hour of showing our love for all things Celtic.
Okay, I'm too loud apparently. How can I be too loud?
Yeah, a bit loud.
Goodness me. This is just madness. Sometimes people can't hear me, sometimes I'm too loud. And I didn't get all the microphone equipment that I was going to get in Bangkok because I had a bit of a calamitous experience that rendered me incapable of achieving anything.
Yeah, we heard all about it.
That's just, well, I'm not going to publicise it, but hello, Stephen.
Hey, Gav, how you doing? Yeah, we did hear about your Bangkok experience, so I'm not surprised. I'll just leave it at that. I'm not surprised you didn't get what you were intended there to get. But yeah, hi everyone. It's not been a great, I won't lie and say it's been a great week. It seems to be one the disastrous news leak after another, going all the way back, I think, as far as the Kairat game. So let's just say there's plenty to chew over tonight.
And who better to have to complete the quartet to chew over things than Anthony? How's it going, Anthony?
Thank you very much, Gav. Obviously, no tactical review this week, no Celtic games, so I thought I would join you from my office at work, hence the slightly different background than usual. And yes, usually an international break, it gives us a week to refresh ourselves and recharge, but this Celtic own goal, as it were, just rumbles on. So yeah, looking forward to, well, I'm really looking forward to, but yeah, looking forward to sort of picking it apart and having a bit of a chat about what's going on and what happens next.
Okay, what happens next is I would like to ask everyone in the chat, Pete McGee, Monty, Tam Mac, etc., to let us know if anyone's volumes need fine-tuning. If one of us is much louder than the others, let us know, or slightly quieter. We want to make that perfect for you, the viewer, the listener. And in fact, that takes us on to our first point because, well, we haven't been on live for a week. I wanted to wait until the air of gloom had lifted from over Celtic Park and we could come back all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, which hasn't gone too well. But there is some good news, or you might think it's just bad news and irrelevant news, but you, our subscribers, are anything but irrelevant to us. And it wasn't long ago that I was teasing 1888, the 1888th subscriber of A Celtic World. And then we said we would move on to the 1967th. Yes, you with me so far? But
Yep.
But such is the nature of the interest in podcasts at the moment because of all what's going on. The numbers have been really good, really, really healthy recently, and we have absolutely rocketed past 2,000 subscribers. Ta-da! I should have some little thing exploding and champagne and stuff like that, but I don't. But the good news is I checked back to see who was possibly our 1967th, and if you're watching, it's an exciting moment for you, Becca Dewart, 1967. Well done, Becca. Thank you very much. And indeed, thanks to everyone who has subscribed. I'm sure you'll join me in saying that, everyone, won't you?
of course.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
We love our subscribers. And
Well,
a massive thank you also in advance to those of you who are thinking about it right now. And in fact, just dropping your little pointer down to where it says subscribe and hitting it right now. Wow, thank you so much. All right, enough of the housekeeping. That's all the positive news out of the way. Let's turn our attention to Celtic, shall we? And, oh geez, where do we start with this? We'll start with the statement, right? Let me give you the menu, first of all. Where is the menu? This. We'll start with the statement of contempt, as I've taken to calling it. I'm sure somebody else has too. And then the story that was in the Sun. Touch on that for a little bit. And we'll ask, what is the ultimate goal here? Where is this going? And then we'll end it off with something a bit more regular, like talking about players and shit. Do you remember we used to do that? Talk about players and what to expect from them in games and seasons. And okay, so without further ado, Stephen, it's a bit like arguing with a narcissistic girlfriend, isn't it? Where she starts gaslighting you, straw-manning, catastrophizing, blaming everyone but themselves, and dripping with insincerity. Or maybe that's just my life, but tell us your reaction to this statement.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been fairly well covered all over the Celtic social media. But let me just add my 2 pence worth to it. I thought it was an absolutely disgraceful statement, completely devoid of any contrition or any admission of error. And I don't think anybody in the entire world of football could look at what transpired over the transfer window at Celtic and say no one at Celtic made a mistake. I mean, surely they can accept that they got at least some things wrong. I would say they got almost everything wrong. But to go through that whole statement, blaming social media, blaming FSR regulations, when it's all, you're right, they're just absolutely gaslighting us because we're not stupid. We know that so many other clubs in Europe, clubs with less resources than us, managed to navigate the FSR rules quite handily, managed to cope with the social media aspect of football, and managed to get deals done in a timely manner. And we don't have to look really that far to see a club who managed to do that quite well in the closing days of the transfer window, because there's one across the city from us. So it was just an absolute disgrace. But I was surprised they even released a statement. I thought they would just double down and say nothing. But, they made the statement and actually made things worse. And the only positive thing I think that's come out of it is they seem to have united the Celtic support in opposition to them. And that's something that's not easy to do, believe me. I mean, even back in the 1990s, I don't want to go all Celtic down, everybody, but, I was there. And the Celtic support at that time were anything but united. There was a lot of opposition to the Celts for Change movement. And the Celtic Supporters Association, who came out, I think, yesterday and passed a vote of no confidence in the board, they were one of the last people standing who supported the old board of the Kellys and the Whites. So for them, and I believe they represent something like 70,000 fans, that is something, that's a significant move. So that's the only positive I can take out the statement, but the actual content of it was beyond disgraceful.
Absolutely. Now, I don't know how quite to tackle it. I mean, there's no point in us going through it line by line, but maybe we can use some social media responses to sort of tease out the things we want to say about it most. So let's look at this one first of all. The summary of contradictions, if you can see that clearly. Say they're ambitious, admit they won't spend like ambitious clubs. Boast about cash reserves, say cash reserves aren't usable. Promise early transfers, excuse late or no transfers. Promise clarity, hide behind confidentiality. Say Champions League qualification doesn't affect transfers, act like it does. Oops, sorry about that. Anthony,
This
Is it the
statement reads as
contradictions? Yeah. Just go ahead. Give me your top line response to that and those contradictions.
Yeah. So this statement reads as follows: Go away, mind your own business. He's a break. It's not our fault. We're just custodians. Here's your money. Thank you. That was only an excuse skit from 30 years ago, and it kind of feels particularly relevant to that statement that was put out over the weekend. A statement put out at 9 p.m. on a Saturday night, which is usually when you take out the trash, as it were. No name on it, so anonymous. Anonymous. Sorry, use the right words.
Anonymous.
But yeah, to what the tweet there, Gav. Yeah, it's just a lack of accountability. It's just deflect to the tabloid media, because we know Celtic supporters are very distrustful of the media, so let's try and blame them because they spin this into something that's not true, when anyone with a pair of eyes can see that it's incompetence. I wrote this word down and I can't even say it, obfuscate. But blaming financial fair play. So Swiss Ramble did a review of Celtic with the last set of figures, and they had our spending percentage at roughly around 43%. So the cutoff for financial fair play with UEFA is 70%. So we're not even remotely close to starting that. So the fact that they're using that as some sort of road bump, barrier, whatever you want to call it, to signing players is just a joke. Not to mention, there's no problem for the other mob, the other side of the side of Glasgow. And what about every other club in Europe, especially in the smaller leagues? They still seem to do plenty of business without any hassle. So that's just, again, a complete furphy and just trying to muddy the waters. And then lastly, a little bit of point scoring. Look, the Huns, they went out of business and they went bust and all that sort of stuff. It's so childish. It's like, it's not what you want. We want an explanation. We don't want a series of, they're not even excuses. Well, I suppose they are excuses. Well, they think they're excuses, but they're just, as Stephen said, it's done the exact opposite of what they wanted. They wanted us to put this to bed. They honestly thought that this was going to put it to bed.
That's the amazing thing. They thought this was going to be a placatory statement. And
all it's done has united fan bases which generally don't always see eye to eye on most issues, and they're pretty much all united now under one umbrella of sack the board. So it's like, it's quite incredible. Like, it is the own goal of own goals that the Celtic board have done. And for me, Michael Nicholson's, he's in the firing line, and I'll talk more about that in a bit. But for me, he signed off on that, even though nobody put their name to it. He's CEO, so he has to. Yeah, it's very, very, very much Randy Andy, areas. It's shocking. But anyway, but like I said, I'll let the other guys chime in, and I'll come back.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's not much point in me asking a specific question. I think that everyone has something they want to get off their chest right at the top of the show. So, David, go ahead. Your response.
Yeah, for me, one of the comments, I know we're not going through line by line, but one of the comments was when they said, we're not throwing money at transfers. No one said, no one expects you to throw money at transfers. There should be a strategy. And no one has seen a strategy since the start of, since we lost Kyogo, there's been no strategy. So, the idea that we don't want to throw money, I just thought that was another patronising, bit of...
Another straw man,
really
answering questions they weren't asked, or responding to their misconceptions about what the fans are saying.
And they also talked about the self-sustaining element. But, what's self-sustaining about getting put out of the qualification for the Champions League? There's no guarantee we're going to win the league with the squad that we've got. And for me, what would be interesting is to find out, what does Adidas think about the whole shit show? Every week they were bringing out a new T-shirt or a new top. We were upgraded to elite status. But that elite status wasn't based on us having the shitty squad that we've got that is going to struggle in the Europa League. that very few of us are actually interested in. So, I think there must be some interesting discussions to be held between Adidas and our esteemed board.
Yeah.
See, the
What's self-sustaining
interesting
about-
thing about talking about FSR, and Anthony's quite correct by saying we're nowhere near getting in trouble with the financial fair play stuff. But one thing that will put us in trouble with the financial fair play stuff is if our revenue continues to take a bath through lack of Champions League qualification and lack of any sustained run in Europe at all. Because to be honest with you, the way our squad's sitting just now, we're not getting out of that Europa League group. So our turnover next year is going to be way less than last year, and that will bring us closer to the 70% FSR level. We still won't be in danger of going over it, but it will bring us closer. So their own actions or their own lack of action and their own rank incompetence is what could put us in trouble with FSR regulations. And that's the entirely hypocrisy of what they said. And I'll just pull one other thing out. This notion that we won't do anything about the main stand, that this was apparently came out of the meeting with the Celtic Supporters Association. They won't do anything about the South Stand because it's not viable while we still play in the SPFL. I mean, what the fuck? When are we not going to be playing in the SPFL? That's just an absolute nonsensical statement. So what are they going to do? They're just going to wait for it to fall down in 20, 30 years' time and have to rebuild it in an emergency scenario? Because that will be many times more expensive than what it would be just now. That would be just an absolute farcical thing to say. I'm not, they could have said, well, there's no business case for it or something like that. But to say that we can't rebuild the South Stand until we're not playing in the SPFL anymore, that was just absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah. I mean, it's the self-fulfilling prophecy, isn't it? They were keeping cash reserves in case we don't qualify for the Champions League. But there's such a good business case for that, as we all know. Investing sufficiently to maintain your Champions League status. In fact, if we rewind back, I don't know how long ago, 10 days or so ago, I said I'm expecting there to be like an open letter. I expected it to be to Dermot Desmond directly, making that business case. That hasn't been done yet, really. Spelling that out. This kind of took a different approach towards the board, asking for clarification and wanting answers to some questions about why we are where we are. But let me see. A club that comes out every transfer window in net profit are very unlikely to breach FFP. So stockpiling cash that they're too scared to spend. No strategy, no clue. Jobs for the boys. Sack the board. Says that tweet. Now then. Anthony, you mentioned that there was no name put on this and it came out at a funny time at night. But a lot of sort of incredulity that's being expressed is the very tone of it and how people were saying this sounds like it's ChatGPT. Did you see all that stuff?
Yeah, no, I agree, Gav. I mean, I'm surprised. I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised. It's just the tone of it is very condescending. Like it's verbose. It's like it's way too long for what it needed to be. Over 1,000 words. It lacked substance. So for all the words that were there, it didn't actually answer any of the 7 questions that were put to the Celtic board. Not one of them. It's ill-timed because again, it's 9 p.m. on a Saturday night, and on top of that, somebody in the club, quote unquote unnamed source, leaked to the Sun earlier that day that Brendanrodgers is seeking an exit. So the timing of it is just terrible. The optics of it are horrendous. And again, they're probably having a cigar in the boardroom going, we've done a really good job there, guys. Well done. Like, we put out this statement, we're proud of it. Like, it really gets our point across, and that'll show them. And here we are. Like, we're absolutely raging, and now we're all planning what the next steps are for how we inflict, pain on on this club, and it's a club that we all love, but it's seemingly run by a bunch of jokers who are obsessed with stockpiling cash. There seems to be an aversion to spending money, and as a business, it's okay to have a serviceable level of debt. For instance, to fund refurbishment of a stand of your football ground. Yes, use some of your cash, but you could get a finance deal to fund that. And that's future investment in your club. But just to have cash sitting there for what? There's no explanation why it's there. It's just crazy. It's just, like I say, there's just the lack of communication. And yeah, I'm going to launch into Michael Nicholson at some point. So Gav, either I do it now or you want to go another round with everybody, and I'll do it after that. Up to you, tell me. But I've got a few things I want to say about him.
All right. Well, first of all, before we launch into him, there's a new name has popped up, new to me anyway, and a new face, which I've seen since this event, and it's this chap. This is from D. Maguire, everybody's favourite Moses of Blue Sky. Why am I only finding out that our head of communications guy, who's been with us for 20 years, Ian Jameson, is not only a huge Hearts fan, but also has links to the Scottish Scum paper, often releasing stuff to them before us, and is Peter Lawwell's man. So I just want to talk to you guys. You know this fella's name? He's had a job there for 20 years. 20 years in PR. Is that a good thing, David?
To be honest, I don't really mind the fact that he's a Hearts fan, apart from his obvious lack of judgment. But you're hiring people based on their competency, hopefully. No, for me, if he is a some journalist and sort of soup taker for law, etc., it's clearly not good enough. It's no surprise when you look at the Sun coming out with this. Rodgers is definitely off, which again, it would be no surprise to anyone if he did leave. Compared to the last time when he jumped ship, I think this time, I think most of us would be, fairly understandable of him. He's not had an opportunity to bring in players. And then all the stuff with Maeda and everything else that's been going on just now, it's just it's the most
there's a lot going on.
It's the most embarrassing shit show you've seen him in. The Hunts used to bring out these statements that we laughed about for days. But this was a statement that was, as Anthony and Stephen have said, it came out at kind of 8 o'clock on a Saturday night. Who's the person that signed off? Someone must have said, when are we going to do it? Do you think that Lol and his cronies were writing that at sort of 7:30 at night, and then thought, let's get this out? They've been working on it for days, and then thought, oh well, we better get this out, quickly.
Well, given that this was in response to a plea for a degree of transparency, to release it like this is an absolute joke, isn't it? It's a slap in the face. Stephen, before we let Anthony jump in and go mad on Nicholson, point the finger elsewhere if you wish to for this statement.
Well, I don't know about the statement. Yeah, the statement has clearly come. It's the child of Peter. Certainly, leaking the story to the Sun is that's the modus operandi of Peter Lowe, and always has been. And I think one thing that's become really, really apparent now is the way Rodgers left the first time, and a lot of people never forgave him for the way they left, but the circumstances were almost entirely identical. Stories were being leaked to the newspapers at that time about him trying to work his ticket. He just came off a transfer window that had been enormously underwhelming, and they were signing players without his say. So I think what's happening now is shedding a lot of light on what happened then, and it's just history repeating itself. If Peter Law thinks, at this point in time that we're all stupid enough to believe that, and believe that we're going to swallow the fact that they're just trying to shift the blame for the whole thing onto Brendan-Rodgers, then he doesn't give as much credit for intelligence. And I would like to think, almost everyone to a man can see that for what it is. But before Anthony let's rip into Michael Nicholson, I think the main protagonist that we should be aiming at in all this is without a doubt Dermot Desmond. Because Dermot Desmond, the man that's pulling these guys' strings, these guys are just puppets. And he's the man that's working them all. So he's the guy that we have to be the focus of our ire moving forward. The rest are just monkeys when he's the organ grinder. And he's just I've had a bit of a look into his background today. And I've never really done it before. I've never paid too much attention to, where he got his money, where he's made all his cash from and what his dealings have been. And the fact of the matter is he's the type of loathsome free market capitalist that I just absolutely despise. Someone that's made money out of nothing really, just moving shares around, buying companies, asset stripping them, selling them on. And there's a seam of corruption is ran through his whole business career with various members of the Irish government. Gav, you might know a bit more about that than me. And he's just a loathsome individual. And it's not going to be easy to get him out of the club. But I think what's became apparent is that's what has to happen, whether it's now or at some point in the very near future. That should be the focus. We can dance around the issue because I think I don't see how Michael Nicholson survives this. I think he'll end up going. Peter Law's the chairman. He'll probably slither away of his own accord under some rock somewhere. But I think Michael Nicholson will end up losing his job. But Desmond's the man we really have to shift.
Okay, and I promise I'm coming to you in a second, Anthony. But before I forget, David, you want to deal with this?
Yeah, I'll try not to cry. Leslie Stronach was founder member of the Bangkok Celtic Supporters Club. Sadly passed away last week with after a long bout fighting with leukemia. We all love him to bits, miss him to bits. He was the loveliest, most generous, wonderful guy. We're going to have some drinks in his memory this Saturday at the in O'Shea's. So if anyone's about, to get a chance to remember one of the most amazing. So I'm going to cry.
Okay. All right. Thanks for that. Okay. A slight change of tone then, Anthony. You can rip into Nicholson now.
So, core responsibilities of a CEO: strategy and vision, operations, leadership, financials, risk management, stakeholder communication. So, strategy, world class is a slogan. That's not actually a strategy or a vision. That's just a 5-word slogan. Operations, well, can't sign players in a timely manner. So I'd say not really fitting the bill there. Leadership, we've got players actively speaking out against the club. So again, you've got to question the leadership there. Financials, well, obsessed with those, obviously stockpiling cash. Risk management, risk averse to our detriment. So burning our chances of getting into the Champions League by not signing players in a timely fashion. So therefore we lose 40 million in revenue just to, because we saved 5 or 10 million in transfers. And stakeholder communication, say no more. I mean, one statement in the last 3 years, that's all we've had. It's not even attributed to him. But I'll say it again, he would have to have signed off on it because that's his job. So, he's also a director of the board as well. So he's not just an employee. He is, part of that board as well. I had a look at his remuneration for the 23-24 season. He cleared nearly £750,000, including pension, for his wicket for being CEO. I think he's doing a terrible job. And Stephen's right. He should lose his job. Is he solely to blame? Probably not, but heads have got to roll. And for me, he's employed to run that football club, and he's not delivering on the key metrics of a CEO. Those 6 things I just listed there, the only thing he's probably doing all right is the financials because they're just piling cash. But that's obviously in itself a problem because then you pay tax, corporate tax, rather than actually spending it and utilizing those funds to further push along and expand and make Celtic a greater and better club and fan experience. And I'll talk about the things that the ways we can hurt the club and the ways that they'll sit up and take notice. But for us, I think part of it needs to be that, there needs to be pressure on him, because ultimately it's his job to respond to this. And so far he's done an absolute terrible job.
Well, it's definitely interesting to consider where this is going, isn't it? Here's the latest development I've seen is that there's a vote of no confidence being given by many fan groups and a lot of the people that were involved, in that original groundswell of support for that letter, all the various fan groups. What do we think is the next step, Stephen? A vote of no confidence means very little. It's just us saying we don't accept that you're still in, dereliction of duty. Where do you think we go from here?
Well, you say it doesn't mean anything, but we don't really know what it means, because as far as I'm aware, it's never happened before. It certainly hasn't during my almost 50 years supporting Celtic. So I've never seen, such a united front saying, we don't want this board, and we don't want this to continue. So I've got no idea how that pressure is going to come to bear on the board. There's a lot of talk just now about partial boycotts. There's a lot of talk about, boycotts of merchandise, not taking up Europa League packages. And I think these things are all worthwhile pursuing. And it will make, maybe not Dermot Desmond, but I think Dermot Desmond is a lost cause at the moment. He's going to have to be driven out the club. He's not going to go quietly. I think what we need to do, and this has been mentioned by a number of different groups, is one, try and re-engage all the small shareholders with their shares, because apparently, according to the Celtic Trust, 20% of the Celtic shareholding is missing. And that's what's basically allowing Dermot Desmond to have more or less control of the club as if he's the owner, because this 20% is completely missing. Either people have died or people have changed address and lost touch with their shares. So that's something we need to keep pushing for. And we also need, if we put financial pressure on the club, it might affect some of the other shareholders, some of the other smaller shareholding groups like Nick Train, who I know who are the second highest shareholders in the club behind Dermot Desmond. And they're just an investment house as far as I know. So that sort of thing might spook them a bit and bring them, force them to bring some pressure to bear on the club. But I think what needs to happen here is there needs to be a two-pronged approach. The supporters need to stay united on this, and they need to keep the board on their sights. But we're also looking for some wealthy Celtic fans, someone with more business knowledge than we have here, to start making moves to see what can be done from a business point of view to try and buy Celtic from Dermot Desmond. Are there any potential investors out there who would see Celtic as a good investment at this point? Surely there is. The market capitalisation of the club apparently now is about £200 million. But we're sitting here at the moment with almost £100 million seemingly in cash. So surely that's a good business opportunity for someone right there. There was talk today, I don't know if it was just whispers, about the guy who owns Liverpool. Is it Henry, you call him, the American businessman who might have an interest in buying into Celtic? And it's something like that we need. So it needs to be a two-pronged approach here. And just as it was in 1995, 1994, 95, the fans themselves led the charge by bringing pressure on sponsors, bringing pressure on the club's finances by boycotting matches and stuff. But we also need a Ferris McCann type figure who's going to come in and help us here. And I really hope, the likes of David Lowe, who was involved at the time, is maybe going to take a role in this again, and try and get some interest, because that needs to be where we're heading. Because as I said before, this is never going to change while Dermot Desmond is there, and that's the only way I can really see him shifting.
I mean, this is sort of seismic changes, David, isn't it? And sometimes, I'm not going to say bear the devil, but Desmond's not the ideal guy to be pulling any strings as the chief shareholder, but we've seen what happens at other clubs in circumstances where they get bought over by
Yes, sure.
countries and things.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously we have to be careful what we wish for. I don't think anyone wants the lunatics that have been, sort of queuing up to buy the Huns over the last decade. Do we want Saudi money? I don't think so. Depending on the American buyers and their, rationale for buying us, it would be lovely to think there would be a billionaire out there who, is a massive Celtic fan. Chances are fairly remote. And I think that there's loads of non-Celtic fans out there ripping the piss out of us for, we've won like 24 out of the last 27 domestic trophies. We're top of the league. We're in the quarter final of the League Cup, etc., etc. But the reality is, this is the worst position we've been in for a long time. And I think it's difficult because we're in such a position of strength. Chances are, if things don't go well, then they'll just say, "Fuck it, we'll just sell Maeda, and we'll see what happens from there." Hoping that somebody like Iheanacho or Kenny is going to step up, but no, it's an absolute shit show.
Well, in the interest of sharing all opinions, here's one from Coolest Sibling, who is no doubt the coolest of the siblings. You are doing your best with the other podcasters to hand Rangers the league. 25-year dominance, quad trebles, 13 out of last 14 titles, most successful period in club's history. But yous want change. Stephen, what the hell are you trying to do? Destroying Celtic like this?
Yeah, I mean, I can only assume that the coolest sibling is actually an only child, because I can't imagine there's any competition in his household for that title. Yeah, it's just absolute nonsense. I mean, domestic dominance is great, and we've all enjoyed it, but you'd have to be really naive not to look at the strength of the competition during that period of domestic dominance. And during the period of domestic dominance that we've enjoyed, our main rival, our only rival, had quite literally died. So when that happens, you can't just pat yourself in the back and say, "Oh, we've won all these leagues, we've won all these trebles." Where we should be benchmarking ourselves is in Europe. And our record in Europe over the past 20 years is quite frankly appalling, disgraceful, and embarrassing. And where we find ourselves now in terms of coefficient is a direct result of that. And, at the end of the day, you can talk all you like about domestic dominance, right? But our failure to qualify for the Champions League, however many times over the last decade, we've left something in the region of £200 million in revenue on the field by our lack of ambition, our lack of our ability to close deals early in the transfer window. That's on occasions where we've had to play qualifiers. Our record in these qualifiers is abominable. And we have to stop doing this. We have to stop just patting ourselves in the back for winning a 2-horse race when the other horse in the race has turned out to be a 3-legged cow. And the simple fact of the matter is, Rangers, for all we have a good laugh at them, the banter years have been great and all that, eventually they will get their act together. And when they do, if we don't do something about this now, then we're going to be in real trouble. Because they will not. I mean, they've got investors now who've bought into them with the intention of making money, and that's fine. We know that because they see value in them if they can get them into the Champions League. And I wouldn't have a problem with somebody buying into Celtic for that reason. I'm not really sure how much worse we can be than what we are right now, with a board who seem absolutely paralysed to do anything which is going to improve the club in any way, shape or form. So I'm not sure. Yes, David's right. We don't want Saudi money. We don't want any of that stuff. But I'm not sure we're in a position now where we can say, no, we don't want anybody looking to buy over the club, because I'm not really sure how much of a worse job they can do than the current jokers. And
there's the direction of travel, isn't it, that is the greatest concern, Anthony? If we have a few more years of this sort of lack of ambition, lack of qualification for Champions League, where do we end up?
Well, it's complacency, isn't it, Gav? We're coming off a long period of domestic dominance, but we're going to end up like the Roman Empire, and we're just going to stagnate and die. You've got to keep evolving. You've got to keep trying to push the cart forwards. And I'm having a look. I had a look at the reports from the financial figures from last season, and the key performance indicators for the board are as follows: football success, match attendance statistics, sales performance per revenue stream, wages and other costs, capital expenditure, profit and cash generation, shareholder value, and player trading. So again, I would say in most of those, the board aren't meeting their fiducial duties for the best interests of the company. Now, how can we hurt them? Well, again, there's 124 or 125 million quid comes from football stadium operations. So that's tickets, buying pies at the game, stuff like that. 30 million in merchandise and another 44.5 million in multimedia. So that's Celtic TV and all the other various things they do online. So it's pretty obvious if you're at Celtic, if you're in Glasgow, maybe consider those Europa League packages and say, stuff it, I'm not going to go. If you buy merchandise, buy strips, just say this year, well, actually, I'm tapped out. I've got every other hoop stop. I don't need one this year. Give that a miss. That'll hurt them. And thirdly, if you're an international subscriber, give Celtic TV the bin. Because it's a terrible product anyway. It's not like it's world class. I'd say it's third world, actually. And hurt them that way. And once their revenue goes down, that affects their shareholder value. That affects their profit and cash generation. It affects their match attendance statistics. So once they all start going down the way, then they might sit up and take notice and actually address this and treat this as a serious problem, rather than treating us with utter disdain.
Yeah, this is kind of the point here, isn't it? If we're standing still, let's face it, if we're standing still, if not going backwards, other clubs, can catch up in Scotland, but that's one thing, that's one possibility. But I mean, we're just going to diminish year upon year in stature as a club. That's the fear. And we had that run of Champions League qualification, automatic Champions League qualification because of the coefficient, which was awesome. But we seem to be incapable as an organisation at getting through qualifiers, David. So, given that coefficient is not looking pretty for the next while, neither are our prospects unless there's a change of direction.
Yeah. I mean, we've said all along that if there was any strategy that the board has, it just seems to be, stay 5 points clear of the Huns. The Huns should never be our barometer. If we had looked after a squad that was capable of taking Bayern Munich to, a Boher from extra time, that should have been looking after itself in terms of domestic domination for years to come. So I think if we're not careful, the Huns could sniff blood, a few dodgy decisions, etc., get the old Celtic paranoia in there. But it's our own fault. We were in a position of strength, and get 2 or 3 replacements in last January, and we were potentially in with a more than fighting chance against Bayern Munich. And our next game in Europe after Bayern Munich was the fiasco with the pub team from Almaty. So we got what we deserved.
David hit the nail on the head there. The recruitment has to be 6 months in advance. If you're at qualifiers early in your season, you need the players in the January window, so they're bedded into your squad and system for those qualifiers. Signing them a week before or 2 weeks after, as the case may be, doesn't help. You've got to get them in. And this was the thing. This was the biggest problem about selling Kyogo in January, was he wasn't replaced then, but you buy a replacement then so that he can then have 6 months to bed in. The season, the league was pretty much wrapped up or thereabouts. So that wasn't, it gives you a chance to bleed these players in so that they're Celtic ready. And then when you hit these qualifiers, you've got a relatively stable squad. Yes, you can still add more players, but you've got your replacements in the door 6 months ahead of time. That's strategy, that's forward planning, that's having a vision for your squad. But we are just retroactively trying to react to everything. And the Dias and Maeda thing's the perfect example. They knew for a long time that he wanted to go, and somehow they couldn't find a replacement that whole transfer window. And then on the last day, they basically said, sorry, Dyson, you're staying with us. He delayed his trip to Japan by an extra day, thinking he was going to be doing his medical for Brentford, presumably. And now he's ready to come back to Celtic and put a shift in for the next 6 months. We all know full well that he doesn't really want to be there.
Well, that is exactly what we're going to be talking about, Anthony. You hit the nail on the head there. After this short message from some of our international viewers, because there's approximately 250 people watching live, which is pretty darn good for a little old channel like ours, just starting our third season of podcasting from all around the world. So here's a message from somebody in a distant land.
How's it, bro? Loving a Celtic world. It's fantastic. Definitely worth a subscribe, hey.
Definitely worth a subscribe, hey, wouldn't you say so, David?
Always, and just to comment on Mo's comment about how I'm basically a Ned. I'm a Govan boy after all, so suppose the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. So and also I think Gav, you said you were quite surprised when how passionate I was when I was watching I'll call them once again. I do get quite emotional watching the beloved Celtic.
Yes, you were on the edge of your seat as I was slowly sliding off mine. All right. Well, Dias and Maeda, you just mentioned it, so let's move on to that, shall we? How do we do that? Let's have a look at this tweet. This is from Jerry Quo. I said last week that at Celtic the tail is wagging the dog. Here's another example. A player wants to leave, doesn't get his move, and goes to the press to complain. Since when did we ever allow players to dictate to the club? I must have missed that memo. Stephen.
Yeah, I don't think that's quite that. I think that's been a bit disingenuous there as to what actually happened. I think Dias and Maeda, as Anthony mentioned, he was late arriving for the Japanese national team, and I think he was just asked why he was late, and he just told the truth. Now, this is the modern football world, and especially the circumstances which we find ourselves in, means that players are going to move on. And everybody had a fair idea that this might be the summer that Dias and Maeda moved on. So I don't think anybody's really surprised at that news, that he'd had a move lined up. What is surprising is that, we've forced him to stay because, again, we're so inept in the market that we weren't able to sign a replacement. We weren't able to replace Kyogo in January. And the year before that, we weren't even able to replace Georgios Giacomakis in a timely manner, which is how we ended up with Adam Maeda on a short-term loan with no option to buy. So, this has been a window after window after window shambles that we've got brewing here. And if you think this window's been a shit show, I can only look on in horror as to what might happen next summer when you've got all these players who are going to be leaving. Probably Hatate's got his eyes on a move away. You would think Cameron Carter-Vickers has also got his eyes on a move away. Callum McGregor's a year older, so you're a year closer to have to replace him. Kasper Schmeichel will be gone, so we were looking for another goalkeeper. Even this far out, this has got the looks of another absolute disaster if the current custodians of the club are the ones masterminding it. So this is why it's absolutely imperative that we do something now, because these people can't be trusted, and that's not including looking for a new manager as well, which we will be sooner or later.
Yeah, well, sticking to Maeda, I put a tweet up that well, David didn't like very much, but let's get into that. I'm asking, how long before the fans turn on Maeda? When a player wants away from Celtic, they're immediately excommunicated for such a cardinal sin. Many turned on Kyogo in an instant. At least he managed to get away from it. Maeda's going to have to run out onto the pitch and deal with it. And my point, as I go on to talk about later, is, Maeda's a player that you have to be patient with. And we've, I think, as a fan base, have been patient with him in his first couple of seasons. Every time he ran the ball into touch, every time he spooned across, wasted an opportunity, called him the man with the Maeda's touch. Everything he touched turns to a goal kick. And then we were faithful with him, or patient with him, and then he produced an incredible season for us last year. The question is, what's it going to be like now? How much patience are the fans in the ground going to be having when he spoons across David, when he misses 2 gilt-edged opportunities? You don't think there's going to be bad blood there? Are we going to continue to love him for what he's done?
I don't. I think there's plenty of players out there that are likely to be attacked ahead of Dyson. I think last season he was by miles the player of the year. I think also that the way the pre-season was managed, he didn't play a single second as centre forward, so he was always being played on the left. So suddenly, when things were getting tough, he was being asked to play centre forward for 10-15 minutes, and then even then they would put Kenny on and they would put him back on the left wing. So I think Maeda is still going to be not loved, but not going to take the shit like a lot of other players might do. Number one, behind Hatati, I'd say he's still outstayed by number 2 player at the club.
Yeah, I mean, we all like him, we all love him after last season, but Stephen, do you fear for what the next few months might hold in store for Maeda?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I think we've seen it before. Regardless of how professional you are and how you think you're giving 100%, it's a little 1 or 2% effort plays that let you down at that level. And I don't think. I think you could always forgive Daizen Maeda for letting it slack a bit. He's been a player whose entire game has been built on a maximum effort and almost superhuman levels of pressing and energy and running around. And I just don't think it's realistic to expect that from him when he's more than likely going to be playing for another team in 6 months' time. And I think earlier on in the season, his performances up to now, particularly his penalty, the penalty that he missed against Kairat away, that was really symptomatic to me of a guy whose head's just not in it. It was just an awful penalty kick. It was almost as if he had no. I'm not saying he deliberately missed it. I'm not saying that at all. But there was no conviction behind it, and I think you just didn't at any point think he was going to score. And I think if you leave him as he is now, he's really our only established striker, and he's going to have to play there for the rest of certainly until January at the earliest. And I think I do fear for what we're going for his output and how the fans are going to respond to that.
What do you mean he's our only established striker? Sure, we've just made this incredibly exciting signing, Anthony. Bet you're buzzing.
Well, if TikTok's to be believed, Gav, he looks sharper than he does in some of the AI generated fat people images that have been doing the rounds on social media. So there's hope there. I mean, the only thing we wouldn't be signing him if he couldn't sort of do something. But just about to Maeda just quickly. I mean, we've been down this road before. We had Christopher Ayer, we had Odson Edwards stay a season longer than they wanted to be there. And what happened that season, So we're just going to have to be very careful here. Again, comes back to the board, future-proofing, future planning. We should have sold him in the summer. He had a massive season last season. His value, his stock isn't going to rise any higher. He's 27, 28 years old. If you're ever going to sell him, this was the summer to sell him. So, all you're going to do now is decrease his value if he wants out the door. And ultimately, if the player wants to go, you find a suitable buyer, a suitable price, and you make it happen, and you bring in his replacement. And I know, that sounds simple, but your whole transfer window, and I'm pretty sure they'd have known before that as well that he was going. So, they should have a file of facts full of targets of various levels going, all right, we need to replace Maeda with someone of a similar quality or whatever, and start knocking on doors and making it happen. But, you've got your CEO having his phone switched off, so players can't even get a hold of him, or agents can't even get a hold of him. So, that's the world-class standard that we're dealing with. But yeah, like I said, we managed to get a striker in, we managed to get 2 wingers in the end. Time will tell, and hopefully, at least the training ground that things burning 24/7 to get these guys up to speed, because we've got a very, very tricky run of fixtures starting with Kilmarnock away, who haven't lost in the league yet this season, to kick off a real tough run of fixtures. So it'll be interesting to see how we go.
Back to Iheanacho, David. I don't know if you've seen Celtic AM, but Hamish today interviewed a Borough fan, this female Middlesbrough fan, on to talk about their experience of Iheanacho. And it's the most depressing conversation you'll ever hear. She wanted to say this guy is fucking hopeless, but didn't. She was too polite to say that. But it certainly doesn't whet your appetite. Are you excited about him pulling on the hoops and leading the line?
By all accounts, he'll have to pull quite hard to get hoops on him. But, I think that he's... it's one of those things, if any manager's going to get the best out of him, then there's a chance it could be Rodgers. With all due respect to Middlesbrough, Sunderland is my English team, so Middlesbrough can piss off as well. I don't think I'd be too interested in playing for them either. But I think if he was a capable player, more than capable. If it's true that he has lost quite a bit of weight, then he potentially he might do well for us. But David making joke, shocker.
Worth pointing out.
Didn't have to be funny, but it was still a joke. No. Obviously, same as Ida and everyone else, you hope that this guy is going to see this as the opportunity that it is, playing in front of 60,000 Celtic fans, a chance to be a hero, and let's hope mentally he's up for it. And if he is, then we might have a player.
Damn it, I'm trying to pull this one up. Yeah, Michael says, girl in question said he wasn't even a striker. Right enough, this was very worrying. She was saying he's not really a striker. He's not a guy who leads the line. He supports your striker. He plays in a 2 up front. And you're thinking, oh my God, what is going on, Stephen? That doesn't augur well.
I think it shows how far we've fallen in terms of our expectations, that we're all getting excited about a 2-minute TikTok video showing him running in and out a few speed poles, and the fact that he doesn't look like Robbie Coltrane has got us all really happy. But the fact is that this is a player who hasn't been a good player for at least 4 seasons. So I don't know what the future holds for him. Maybe he'll come from nowhere and have a really good season. But I think you have to say that the odds are very much against it. And usually when a player's trajectory is going in that direction, then it's something that's very hard to arrest. So I'm not expecting anything from Iheanacho. And I don't think, unless Brendan can pull some magic on him, I don't see that working out at all. So I think we're going to be left with Daizen Maeda up front, with Shinya Maeda and Johnny Kenny as the other 2 options. I wish him well in the actual, because if he does become a Celtic hero, it's one of the best places to be a hero. But I just can't see it.
And can you see this? That Borough got David Strelic, who looks like a player, and he's gone to Middlesbrough. That's depressing, isn't it? Depressing for him.
That just shows you that just shows you that there were good players available in the window, and any notion that there weren't. I mean, if Middlesbrough can attract a striker, then you have to say that we can as well. So
I think I was just trying to say, I think Aberdeen made the best signing of the lot. They signed that Swedish international winger. I think that's the signing of the season. I mean, on paper anyway. I mean, obviously, it depends how he goes, but that seems like a brilliant bit of business. That's Aberdeen. It's just crazy. So it can be done. As basically, I'm sorry to interrupt you there, Stephen, but just it can be done. That's the thing. We seem to make an absolute fist of it, and other clubs just get their business done. So,
well, Monty's saying something positive there. Iheanacho on a free is a good signing. Well, I think he's saying something positive because, Monty's sense of humour is sometimes quite difficult to gauge, so that might be a gag too. But yes, good players were available. Did we get one? Is the question. What can Celtic fans expect from new signing Sebastian Tenekti? There seem to be some suggestions that this guy is useful. What was it? He's a showman. He's an entertainer. Likes to beat people. Stephen's excited about that. Someone who apparently doesn't like to beat people that much is Balakwisha. He's not the get it to the byline winger that you love, Stephen. He might be cutting in a bit too often and frustrating you. But the two of them are where our hopes lie, really, at this stage of the game, aren't they?
Well, the two of them play in the same position, so that's another matter, though, isn't it? So, what was the planning behind that? Then I have no idea. I suspect there wasn't any. But the way I've read various things about Tuneki. The main thing that seems to run through it is that he likes to beat a man. He has got a bit of skill, but he struggles a bit with end product, and that just sounds remarkably to me like Yang. So I think we might just have signed the Tunisian Yang, because that's Yang all over the back. He can beat a man. He's got a bit of trickery, but his end product is completely missing. I don't know anything about Balakwisha. I haven't watched enough of him to make an opinion. He's certainly been sold to us as a winger, and if he's not a winger, and if he doesn't have any pace, then quite frankly, he's not really any use to us, because we don't need a number 10. And we don't play with a number 10. So unless there's a change of formation coming from Brendanrodgers, then we don't need him in that position. So we need him to be a winger. We actually need one of them to be a right winger. So if one of them can move over there, that would be perfect for us. And I think that's what's going to have to happen, because either that or it's James Forrest or Yang on the right. And that's a choice I don't think any of us want to have to make. So one of these guys is going to have to play in the right, whether they're comfortable there or not.
Okay, well, let us end off this exciting conversation with the Europa League squad omissions. That's, I suppose, the main thing. David, were you shocked to see who's missing from this that shouldn't, or possibly shouldn't be? There's no Maeda, so we've got Iheanacho, who's totally an unknown quantity to us, anyway, and Kenny as our two sort of strikers up front. Were you disappointed there was no space for Shin?
Yeah, for me, for sure. I think Shin deserved to be there ahead of Kenny. But I think one of the challenges, I think we only had 24 in the squad. So in terms of the local, the number of the Scottish players that qualified to allow us to have 25. So that was already a problem. But I guess he was looking at having to have two potential left wingers. So I think if you were keeping Yang and Forrest, then there was a difficult decision to be had. So probably thought that with Maeda and Kenny, then those were marginally better options than having Shin. But I was very surprised that Kenny was picked ahead of Shin, for sure.
Shin was at the wrong end of the foot. This Pork Chop Express. I think that's a joke too. Yeah, the Europa League though, I mean, fucking hell, that's sort of going to be a lightning rod this season, isn't it? Whether people going to go to the games, going to have any interest in it whatsoever. Of course, we're going to support the team, but are we going to... What's your view on that, Anthony? You going to be up watching the Europa League games?
Probably not, because that's usually on at stupid o'clock, and I've got a relatively serious job where I need to be switched on during the day, so it makes it really hard. But I'll see what's possible. But I think part of it as well is that the inevitable comparison to Rangers, because 3 of the teams we play, they also play, and then it will just become media loving with Rangers are qualified, Celtic haven't, or vice versa, and so there's going to be that sort of narrative because we're both in the same competition. So I think that's going to try and create a bit of, animosity or whatever, just somebody sell papers that are, obviously not selling very many these days anyway. But yeah, I hard to say, Gav. I mean, I think there's definitely a groundswell of people who aren't signing up to the direct debits for the Europa League tickets. So I do think there is going to be, decreased attendances, maybe to the point where they've got to close the top of the stands. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, like I said, I think this block of fixtures coming up is going to have a big bearing on our season. We've got a League Cup fixture. We've got a couple of Europa League fixtures. We've got some big ties in the league. It's going to be a really, really big yardstick between now to the next, to the next sort of international break. To sort of see where we are at and see the fact that we've signed these players at 5 minutes to 12 to see whether they're going to bed in and contribute, because they're going to have to, especially those wingers. We're going to need some contributions from those wingers. We've lost so many goals from the wide areas. We need contributions, otherwise we're going to struggle.
Well, we didn't struggle to get through an hour of conversation tonight, lads, and it was... Well, it wasn't all doom and gloom, wasn't it? All negative. I come away feeling, I don't know, how do I feel? No, I wouldn't say uplifted, but at least it wasn't a complete bitch and moan fest.
I think the way the fans are all coming together on social media has been quite energising for me. I think it's been great to see, and I think the way that we all seem to be pulling in the same direction for the first time ever. I mean, when did you ever see, the Green Brigade are a body of guys who divide opinion among the support? The boys Celtic the same, and the Celtic Supporters Association never agree with anyone. So the fact that all these people, all the podcasts, all the social media influencers, if you like to call them that, all the supporters clubs and all the associations are all pulling in the same direction, I think it's been quite uplifting to see.
Well, I think you're the only one who's an influencer here, Stephen, among us.
Yeah.
We're just living in Stephen's world. Isn't that right, lads?
Yep.
All right. On that note, well, let's leave it there. Let's leave it there. Thanks very much, everyone in the chat. As always, lots of people watching. Big numbers when Celtic are going through a lot of trauma. But, you're welcome to stay. You're welcome to come back. Why don't you subscribe and come on this season's journey with the Celtic World. New and exciting podcast you've just discovered. Make it happen. Right, lads?
And please join us for 1:30 p.m. Celtic part-time next Monday night, as I'll be looking at the Kilmarnock away game with Paul, my partner in crime. So we'll be back next week. The tactical review on Monday.
We, of course, will be back on Thursday, won't we? To discuss more of what's going on and to look forward to the games. I'm looking forward to there being some games. Am I? Jesus. Kind of.
Yeah, definitely.
Sort of. But I'm just dreading we're going to be ball-achingly terrible. That's the only thing. So on that happy note, let's call it a day. Thank you very much, everyone in the chat, in the studio, and everyone watching wherever you are around this great big Celtic world. Until Thursday, hail, hail.
Hail, hail.
Hail, hail.